Welcome to this episode of AU Manufacturing Conversations with Brent Balinski, featuring one of the companies we're putting forward as part of our quest to identify Australia's 50 most innovative manufacturers. This is the first time we've ever run this campaign, and we absolutely, positively couldn't have gone ahead without the generous help of Bosch Australia Manufacturing Solutions, SMC Corporation Australia, and lead sponsor MYOB. MYOB is a business management platform that brings together key workflows to fit business needs. MYOB has been part of the fabric of doing business in Australia and New Zealand for more than 30 years and integrates manufacturing, inventory management and accounting to help businesses streamline business processes. Malcolm, thank you very much for joining us here on AU Manufacturing Conversations. It's great to have you on the program.
Look, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thank you.
So the first question for you, like it is for all the guests, is the standard, how did you get here and what do you make?
Oh, okay. That's a big question and it's a bit of a journey. So let me go back with the second part of the question. So what do we make? We actually make a unique audio sensor and we capture welding sounds and we analyse that. So I suppose the manufacturing component of what we do is we've had to make our own microphone, our own processing box, we call it, and we've had to build our own program to accommodate what we do. And so what we do is we monitor the weld quality as it's been done in real time. So we're actually capturing the audio signature of the weld as it's been developed in real time, and we analyse that. And we can tell the welder whether it was a good weld or a bad weld immediately at the end of the weld.
Right, and so that's what you make. How did you get here?
Okay, so I'm a fairly old guy. I started off as a plumber and I've had many jobs. I'm 64 years old at the moment. Through the various exposures to industry and projects, I have accumulated a bit of knowledge around the welding space. And there was a moment, they all talk about a light bulb moment, but there was a moment when I realised that what was happening, well, actually over the phone. Let me go back.
Sure.
Okay, so how we got here was I was classified as a technical expert in welding consumables, and that was fine. My job was to help other people use the products that the company that I was with was selling. And one of them was quite a unique, well, we'll call it a shielding gas mixture. It took a little bit of tweaking of the equipment to make the best performance of the weld. And I was at my desk in Melbourne and a sales rep from South Australia rang me and said, look, I'm having trouble convincing this client to pick up this product. And I said, okay, just hold your phone up and just let the guy do a weld. And so as soon as he did a weld, I called out and said, stop. There's only a couple of seconds. That's all it takes.
Yep.
And I said, no. What this guy needs to do is change a little bit of this voltage value and change a little bit of this amp value, just a very tiny bit, and do it again. So he did it again. And then I said, no, stop. I said, I just want you to increase the stick out just by a couple of millimetres. And instantly the product performed and the weld performed a lot better. And everyone was very thankful and got off the phone. But when I got off the phone, I thought, why does it take myself to be able to advise that person in South Australia, not only the company representative, but the welder as well? Surely there must be a way that we can automate this. And then from that, I started to explore what the possibilities was. And I met up with a guy that was able to guide me in the right direction for a ARC grant, and then the process was to develop a product, and that's where we are now.
Right, from a phone call to a moment of insight to getting on that startup journey, they always call it. One thing I wanted to bring up now is you mentioned, and it's perhaps to do with the timing, and it might be a good place to lead on to. You mentioned in some of your material that you measured 176 companies in Oceania over 20 years of observation. Can you tell me if that aligns with what you're talking about now, and if it's a good jumping off point?
You could call that background awareness or insights that supported what I wanted to achieve. So without that experience, it would probably be hard to say, look, there must be a better way. it's like any athlete or any person that's an expert in their field. There comes a point when they start to say, okay, there must be a better way to do this. And then they do that leap of faith and go down the entrepreneurial startup journey.
You mentioned an ARC program, and also mentioned in your material is a literature review on acoustics that could be measured. No solutions, however. Was the literature review part of the ARC program, or that was your own sort of homework before that? Let's go pick up where you think is most appropriate.
The literature research was really important because prior to us getting an ARC grant, I had to fund our own feasibility study. Okay, so we did a feasibility study to validate, okay, was there something worth investigating? Now, up to this point, I had no idea that people had been investigating this for almost 80 years. And so when we got the ARC grant, one of the criteria of the ARC grant was to do a literature review of any papers associated with acoustic signatures from welding. And what came back was that there was 57 papers written on the very topic, but no solution was forthcoming. So the question becomes, okay, I'm a guy sitting in Melbourne at the end of the phone. How can someone like this come up with a world-changing innovation or technology just like that? And the reason that the solutions weren't found beforehand was the processing power wasn't strong enough. Okay, so all these papers were written, in the 1920s, 1940s, and even the US Atomic Energy Agency was exploring this in 1969. And they all came to a conclusion that if there was a possibility of processing in a sort of a close to real-time activity, then it would be worth it. Well, today, computer power is a lot better, and so we sort of may have lucked in with the technology to process was available, and that's what swayed the ARC committee to offer the grant to us.
So tell us about the ARC project, if you're able to. Were you working with the university or consultants?
Sure. The first hurdle is to convince the committee that you have something viable. Now, we were really fortunate to team up with, and this was this earlier business associate of mine assisted there. We were really lucky to team up with a acoustic professor, Xiao Zhong, who was working in RMIT, and he cottoned on to what we were doing pretty quickly, even though he had nothing to do with welding. He left RMIT and went to UTS. So our application to the ARC grant was about asking UTS to participate in the research. The ultimate aim was to come out of industry with a product. Now, the really encouraging thing from the ARC was when they did their review of our proposal, the most unexciting comment that came back was, oh, look, this is a good idea. And the most exciting comment that came back is, this is going to be a game changer. So there were 7 people in that committee, all with technical expertise associated with what our proposal was. So we had the range from someone who said, yeah, this is not a bad idea, to someone that's saying, this is a game changer, this will change the way people go about welding. From that, we were given the approval and we went to UTS. Now, this is an interesting point. We were also approached by Wollongong University, and they were a little bit miffed that the project, because it was $1.6 million that we were given, not me personally, through the university, that they said, well, why didn't you come to Wollongong? We're the welding centre of excellence. And I said to the dean there, I said, look, the problem is an acoustic problem, not a welding problem. And UTS had the professor, the world-leading professor at UTS. So that's why we went down that path. And the other thing the committee was grateful for or made comment on was that someone from the industry in that field was part of the project team, which was myself. We wouldn't have got the money if it was just strictly an academic process. They could clearly see from my CV that I knew what I was talking about when it came to the welding process. So combined with that, we got a 3-year grant and we developed it.
Right. It'd be handy to know, can I just jump in and ask what sort of timeline that those 3 years were and where are we up to now?
Okay, so the research has been completed. That was completed in 2019. 2020. We started in 2018. There is a little bit of if I can offer a critique, and I told the university this as well, their approach, they're all research academics, and it really required a project management mentality or culture to actually deliver the results. And there was a bit of time lost, I would say 8 months lost, just in trying to coordinate and get them thinking along the lines of project management with deadlines and outcomes, and which was explained back to me. That's not how researchers think, and I can't see why. It is very frustrating and wastes a lot of time when you can't put definitive milestones along the project path.
Yeah, sure. If I had $1 for everyone that said that the culture of a research institute and the culture of a company is very different, then I'd be a rich man and I wouldn't be doing this. So, it's a familiar observation. But yeah, seeing it up close is I'm sure frustrating. But you got there in the end, and that's what matters.
Yeah, that's what matters. Yes.
Right.
Correct.
So you mentioned it's more an acoustic problem than a welding problem to solve. Tell me about what's in the acoustics of what's happening that can be picked out and made useful by, machine learning or whatever else is used.
Okay. So now I've got to be careful here because there's a little bit of commercial sensitivity around what I say. Let me tell you what a couple of the criteria that I was looking for. I wanted to know where the sound actually originates from and how it's actually developed. So given those two parts, that's more commercially sensitive, so I won't go into that. But what I can say is sound on its own carries a lot of information. If you can do a patterning process of how that information presents itself, you can start to do some diagnostics about what is happening at the origin of the sound. And so we did use some machine learning, but in order to do that, you need quite a few files. And that got us to where we are today. And then the next iteration of research that we want to do is go deeper into the sound features that appear and maybe even apply a bit of AI to it so that there can be some diagnostics done automatically at the same time, because the sound variable is so sensitive, it doesn't take much to be able to indicate what's good and what's bad.
Let's sort of get back to the period of 2018, 2020. You finished this project. You're in what looks like a first-time entrepreneurial adventure. And of course, 2020 was an interesting / horrific year for everyone. Tell me about what was going on with you and what it looked like on the ground.
Yeah, okay. So, yes, of course, COVID hit, and that just sort of put a black cloud over everything. People didn't know what to do. Businesses didn't know what to do. We hadn't fully finished our product development as we have today. And it was it was pretty hard to sort of know where to turn or what to do. And for a couple of months there, it was just a matter of, there's a form of depression. I'm not going to get around it, Yep. It's, you feel a bit depressed about where the vision's going to be. And so I just had to draw within myself and draw on my network of support. And my son is also involved in the business, and he's been a great help, and my wife, of course. And that is probably part of the story, is your immediate network of support is really helpful when things aren't looking so good. But then we made a decision that, okay, the pandemic wasn't going to go away. What are we going to do in the meantime? And so we've done everything we could as far as the product goes. And then we decided to make a new product that was associated with compliance that would use our technology. So, for example, prior to this period, I had been saying to a lot of manufacturers, oh, look, our technology will plug into a welding standard, ISO 3834. It'll just plug in. Oh, yeah, okay. How, Malcolm? How will it plug in? And they were never going to buy our tech unless I solved that problem. So for the next 18 months, I basically wrote a book on how our tech plugs into this welding standard. And since then, we've actually had that certified by Lloyd's Register, and things are really looking good. People are much more receptive to our technology now than they had been before.
We'd like to take another moment now to acknowledge our sponsors, MYOB, as well as Bosch Australian Manufacturing Solutions and SMC Corporation Australia. There would be no Australia's 50 Most Innovative Manufacturers campaign without them. Be sure to check them each out via the links in the show notes and give them a follow on LinkedIn. Perhaps I should have asked this earlier, but what's the name of your product? Do you sell this under a certain name?
Okay. It's called an RGL system. Okay. So it stands for red, green, light.
Yep.
So green light if the weld's good, red light if the weld's not so good.
I see.
Very simple.
You've elsewhere mentioned that you started selling products about 2 years ago. Tell me about what's happened since. What have the 2 years been for you? What are you just like working with early stage customers? Blah, blah, blah.
Okay. To get back to a more technical position, so the product at the moment is what they call TRL 9.
Yep.
Okay, technically ready level 9.
Fully commercialized.
Yep. So we now can offer that product. There's some good news and some bad news about our product. The good news is it can be used in a lot of applications. The bad news is it can be used in a lot of applications. So our challenge is to stay focused on one particular application to start with. We will definitely expand into other applications, but if you start doing that now, you lose focus and your message gets diluted. So what we've decided to do is stay in 3 areas. One is welding compliance, the ranking of welding competency, and training. Okay, those 3 elements, they actually interconnect with each other, but they also work separately from each other as well. And so that's what we push out to the marketplace today. We've got 3 or 4 customers that are using our product right now. Our pitch to them is a lot tighter and cleaner than we did when we started because we now understand what they're looking for. And we have just recently been down selected for, I can't say which, but for a defence prime to be involved in a defence asset building project. And that was part of our strategy, is to help secure a marquee customer that could take us global if and when we want to.
Right. You've mentioned the 3 things you focused on: compliance, competency, training. Pick one of them and say how you can assist with it and what that looks like, please.
Well, I'll pick the most topical one.
Sure.
Training. There's a shortage of welders out there. Weld Australia is predicting that there'll be less than 70,000 welders available for the Australian market between now and 2035. And what we can do is we can make anyone a welder in 3 days if they pass the aptitude test. So we can deliver people into welding very, very quickly. But the problem for us and for all institutions is bodies. Okay, so when we can make a statement that we can make anyone a welder in 3 days, then the problem of training people to be welders is no longer a problem. So why aren't we doing it, each and every day? Well, there's a few reasons. One is the institutions are resistant to something that we're presenting, which we can talk about later about the take-up of innovation. Mm-hmm. And then there's the bodies. Where do you physically get people? Now, what we're saying to anyone who will listen to us is if you keep looking for apprentices, you're going to fail in trying to fill that gap of people. I'm a big believer that if you want to see the future, you look at the past. And Australia, if not other countries around the world, have been in this position before where there has been skill shortages. And that was through World War II. Yep. And how did they fulfill that problem? They used women. Well, the men are at war, the women were available. But it wasn't necessarily just because they were women. It was because a method was designed to bring people in to do specific work for a specific task. And that is what we've done with our modular process of making someone a welder in 3 days. The beauty of our approach is that we use technology to overcome instructional work. So in some ways, the candidate actually teaches themselves how to be a welder. And so we see opportunities for pools of people who would not normally be available for a welding task to now become available for a welding task. And that could even be for a short term. They come in, they do some work, they leave. But the company has an opportunity to bring anyone they like in. The process is exactly the same. So within 3 days, that person's replaced. That's one of the things our tech actually does.
That's a focus, getting people trained, quick, smart, because we're going to have a incredible shortage of people that are needed to build infrastructure projects and everything else in the future.
Correct. Yep, absolutely, Brett. That's exactly right.
You mentioned when we spoke at the 50 Most Innovative event at Australian Manufacturing Week that the ARC grant was very useful for your company in the early stage you were, but none of the sort of Quango programs were terribly helpful. Could you sort of expand on that a little bit? Tell me about, first of all, the situation for you and what you would change if you were in charge of delivering government innovation programs of whatever kind.
Okay, you might be after some free consultancy here, Brett.
Perhaps.
Okay, so it took me a few years to come to this conclusion about the Quangos that are available. There are multiple hubs of organisations that are trying to help industry innovate. There's quite a number. And the problem is that they are governed by rules and self-interest that doesn't allow for the freedom of accessing innovation. And in some ways, they just can't help themselves. They're either controlled by the rules that the government have imposed on them, or the innovation that's presented to them either embarrasses them or doesn't make them look as good back to the government as they would like. And I can give you an example with AMGC. We approached them about putting our system into ISO 3834, which is an element that they were working on. And we had a champion in the organisation in South Australia, but unfortunately that chap left and they didn't want to know us. We had to go and do something ourselves because, I don't know, it just wasn't, I could rattle off a whole heap of different organisations that are working on the same premise, from innovation hubs at universities to defence, CDIC, the list goes on. It's really disappointing that it's not a pathway that it's easily navigated, even for someone like us. Welding is not sexy, okay? And everyone wants to look at stuff that's sexy. But the problem is, if you don't get the basics and the foundations right, it doesn't matter about the sexy stuff, because you still got to build a launch pad. You still got to build a ship. You still got to build a bridge. You still got to build a building. And if you've got this massive gap, then you should be looking at that. I mean, studying the speed of a scramjet missile, very exciting. But, what's the point of all that if you can't get a trailer to deliver it to where it needs to be?
Correct.
Shot off. So you asked about, okay, what would I suggest the problem is? And we are talking millions and millions of taxpayers' dollars being spent on all these Quangos. So I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know whether I had the solution, but I did write to the previous industry defence minister on this topic, and unfortunately there was a change of government, so that correspondence probably disappeared. The government should be creating entities, even if they are Quangos, to approach industry associations. The key is the industry association, because they have a membership and they have a visibility over the capability of their membership all the time. And so the government should be interacting with these people and having them as part of their assessment committee to evaluate what they need to be developed, or who can develop it, or is there a possibility of this company, they're not quite doing it yet, but if we talk to them, they might be interested. And that way there's more industry association, but they're not talking directly to the company. I think this is one of the things the government is fearful of, is They don't want to be seen to be biased towards one company over another, and that's completely fine. I totally understand that. But the industry association is made up of people who, they have a charter, they have processes and so on, they have meetings, they have membership, and they could be the way into the solutions that the government are looking for. And the other good thing about that is, if that is the case, then industry will pick up that, maybe I need to be part of that association or part of this association and that association. So there's a self-perpetuating support that the industry association can also fund itself through its membership fees and then participate in there. But it's just, I don't know what it is that stops that. But anyway.
Yeah, it's a difficult one when you're talking about these big honking, changing the culture type things, like where do you start? And with government policy, they'll have, for example, a few technology priority areas and all the grants are focused towards them. And it's at the expense of a bunch of other very important enabling things. Like you said, a hypersonic vehicle is a wonderful and exciting, sexy thing to develop. But there are so many very basic types of manufacturing that will feed into that and they get overlooked.
Yeah, it's correct. Absolutely. Spot on, mate. Well, look, this actually leads on to another element of how the government can improve capability within Australian industry.
Sure.
There's a lot of universities that are creating these innovation hubs, and the problem for that is they employ people who are business developers but don't have enough on-the-ground, hands-on experience about how manufacturing works. So when they go into a manufacturing company, and they'll say, look, we're a university, we've just created this hub, and we'd love to do some research for you. Just tell us what your problems are. And the manufacturer looks at them and says, well, I haven't got any problems. And from their perspective, they're saying, we've been working okay, I don't have any problems. We all know they do have problems, but it's that connection between what is something that's of value that can be researched that the company isn't aware of. And the business developer from the university doesn't have the expertise or the time to do that investigation. And so all these hubs are a waste of money.
Yeah, well, I've seen some ones that have done very little with a lot. I mean, there is obviously a misalignment between private industry and the sorts of people who are tasked with, as you say, business development roles. And I don't want to talk shit about people who are in such roles. It's just that they don't have enough time to know what they're doing. They come in from God knows where and spread so thinly over so many companies that they don't have the time to engage properly and to see where there might be a place where the program can overlap with what the company is doing. And it's just, it's a complicated thing to get together, and it beats me as to what you do, but I can see the difficulties involved, certainly.
Yeah, for sure.
We've covered on pretty much everything on the list. Is there anything you'd like to say, perhaps a closing comment, or anything you'd like to come back to, Malcolm?
One thing I would like to get forward is the difficulties of getting innovation up into actual use. You've probably heard it many times. If I knew it was this difficult, maybe I wouldn't have started. But then I think in some ways you've got to look at the benefits that you're trying to achieve, and you've got to, if I was to give some advice to any other budding entrepreneur, you've got to look at the thing that you're doing has got to create a greater good than just yourself. Everyone wants to make money. That's great. But that'll only take you so far. The thing that you are developing, pushing, making has to deliver something greater than just yourself. So for me, I'm really interested in making Australian manufacturing successful, because at the end of the day, if it's not, then where are all the jobs going to come from, and where is all the income going to come from everyone? So that's what drives me. Yes, we're going to make some money, and that's all very good. But at my age, I live a comfortable life, but I want Australia, to quote a former Prime Minister, to be the smart country. Australia can be just so clever. It does frustrate me that we lose a lot of opportunity. So that's my parting gesture, if that helps at all.
Sure. You got to have a mission that is bigger than just making a widget and selling it. And if that's not driving you, then your life is
Well, not hollow. It could still be nice, but it's you're not going to have the sense of purpose, and you're probably going to be doing things for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and you'll hit a certain limit. That'll take you so far, but it just won't take you to that bigger appreciation of what you're doing. I've often say to people that I work with, you're going to walk through a desert at some stage, and you're going to be really thirsty for water. So what's going to get you to the other side? It's going to be the vision that you are doing something greater than your own self-good.
Yeah, well, that's what got you through COVID and a bunch of other low times, I'm sure. Malcolm, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for donating so much of your morning to this podcast, lovely to speak to you.
Yeah, excellent. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, well, I think we'll see each other at the breakfast on July 4th.
The breakfast, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks again. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Bye, Malcolm.